wondering if I were the owner of a damaged lower unit, would I buy a used one with some sort of warranty, or should I retrofit, build it, looking how much time and effort it takes? I would imagine that labor would be to the roof. I don't know. Totally depends on what lower unit you have and also who is rebuilding it. So for one, if you've got, okay, let's say you've got like Chuga, or not Chuga, but the outboard guy. If you've got a 30 horsepower Yamaha 1988 two-stroke lower unit, you could get a good used lower unit for $400. Now, if you want to rebuild that, like let's say you've got, a gear failed or something like that, a bearing failed, the case is still good, and you want to take the time to disassemble it, buy a new bearing, buy a new gear, buy a new race. Usually they come as a set. And let's say that is a couple $100. And then you buy a shim set, that's another $50. Then you buy, the gear, and all of a sudden, just in parts, you're more than what a used good gear case is going to cost. And you've got to take all the time to do it. And let's say you don't do it properly and you blow the gear case up. You just wasted all that money. But also at the same time, how much is a 30 horsepower new lower unit? Maybe $1,000. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the smaller gear cases, they're not as expensive as if you got a 300. If you got a 300, you're talking about a $6,000-$7,000 gear case. Okay, now we can have the discussion on rebuilding it. But also, depending on the shop, like if you find somewhere that rebuilds gear cases, I don't think there are as many out there as there used to be. It's kind of like a dying art, I guess you would say, is there's not near as many shops out there rebuilding gear cases as there used to be. People aren't doing it anymore. They just buy new ones, and then also aftermarket OBR, SEI, that kind of stuff. You can get an aftermarket lower unit for say $3,500 and comes with a 3-year warranty. So it's kind of like by the time you pay a shop to buy all the gears and the shim set and all that stuff, and then spend 8 hours rebuilding it, depending on how bad your gear case is. Like if you're in saltwater, getting that gear case apart, you're drilling out the gland nut, you're heating up the gear case, your pinion gear is welded itself onto the drive shaft, you got the vice grips on there, hammer that off. You've got a lot of stuff going on here to get all this stuff out. Then you got to buy a seal kit. And then you got to buy the races, the bearings, all that. It can get pretty expensive and timely to do it. Granted, if you find a good shop that rebuilds them more regularly, they're going to have everything set up. You know what I'm saying? Like they've got all their shims out. They've got all their parts there. Everything's right there, and they can do it in a quicker manner, which saves you on the time aspect. But realistically, it's almost... You definitely have to do your research. If there's no place around you that rebuilds gear cases, and boxing up your gear case, mailing it to a shop to rebuild, and then them mailing it back and paying them to do it, by that time, the time that it takes for you to do all that, the time it takes them to do it, the time in the shipping and all that other stuff and all the parts, generally it doesn't outweigh it. When you can go and buy a rebuilt gear case, or you can buy an aftermarket gear case, or you can buy a used gear case, and kind of like the time and the money, it almost equals out, or is way more beneficial to buy, remove, and replace than have rebuilt. Again, every situation's totally different. If you've got, depending on the situation, in some instances, the rebuild is going to be worth it over buying new, but that's something that, again, totally situational. But at least now that gets you thinking about, what exactly the thought process is there, and which one's going to weigh in your benefit depending on your situation. Next question is, why do people hate two-strokes? I mean, I don't really think that. Okay, so yeah, there's definitely, okay, you got two different groups here. You got the two-stroke mafia, which are people that are going to die on the hill of a two-stroke, and that's just what it is. And then you got the people that hate them. So most usually the two-stroke mafia they usually work on their own stuff. A lot of them, they like the power, because you got more power out of a two-stroke than you do out of a four-stroke, just simply because of the physics of it. I mean, it's less strokes, it's more power, it's more instant. And then also they're a lot easier to work on. People can the service is cheaper, and there's a lot of benefits to a two-stroke. They hate gas, like if you got bad gas, dirty gas, ethanol, any of that stuff, very hard on a two-stroke depending on how you use it. And then also storage can be a problem if you got ethanol fuel or poor fuel and you feed that to the two-stroke. It can cause you problems. But with a two-stroke, taking apart a carburetor, cleaning it, rebuilding it, putting it back together, very simple. Most people can still do that. And if you can do that, then there you go. That's why they're going to love the two-stroke, because it doesn't stop them when it breaks. A lot of people like that, if you have a four-stroke and you don't know that much about them, then they can be more difficult and you're not as comfortable with it. So like, whereas if something goes wrong with the two-stroke, you know everything about it and you can fix it and be up and running back on the lake the next day, opposed to this one. If the four-stroke goes down, you don't know much about it. You don't have the sensors, the computers, all that other stuff, which once you do a lot of them, I think four-stroke is just as easy to work on as two-stroke. So, it's totally a familiarity thing. Like, how familiar are you with the product? But that's the two-stroke mafia. Then the other people that completely hate two-strokes are usually people where I don't even think it really matters that it was a two-stroke, and these are going to be branded people as well. So especially in boating, if you have a very bad experience, this is why so many people hate Evinrude. This is why so many people hate certain Yamahas and certain Mercuries. You could name the brand. There are people that hate other brands. Ford, Chevy, Dodge, there's increments where people hate the other one for whatever reason. And generally, it's been my experience that most of the time, those that are in the hate camp have had a horrible experience. So somebody that bought a 3.3 Yamaha HPDI and the thing was always broken. They blew up power heads. They had constant problems. It drained them of thousands and thousands of dollars. They hate Yamahas. They hate two-strokes. They do not want anything to do with it, and that is why they don't like them. Same thing for Optimaxes. The first Optipops that came out, people that paid thousands and thousands of dollars to get the brand new Optimax, and the thing kept blowing up. It cost them thousands of dollars. They were always missing time on the water in seasons, and their season is, say, a 3-month season, and they basically didn't get to do any boating, any fishing for 2 months of the 3-month season because this two-stroke blew up the whole time. They hate Mercury and they hate two-strokes. That's ingrained in them and will be ingrained in them. Same thing for everybody that got burned on a Ficht, and everybody that got burned on a Force, everybody that got burned on, name your brand and model. Those people that got terrible experience, pretty much why a lot of people hate Evinrude is because Evinrude was always a 50-50 brand in my opinion, because they had people like me. I had a 1990, I can't remember the exact year, but I had a 250 Ocean Runner, Evinrude Ocean Runner. That thing ran 3 seasons flawless, used it 2-3 times a week, no problems whatsoever. The plastic carburetors, I got rid of the oil system, pre-mixed it, and ran everywhere in that boat, no issues. Then you have other people that have the same thing, same Ocean Runner, and they had nothing but problems. The plastic carburetors, the warping, the oiling problems, the blue power heads, like all kinds of issues. We both had the same engines, but some of us, 50% of us, had an excellent experience and had no issues. The other 50% just had nothing but problems and constantly losing money and then got burned. And then you got the new era, I guess you would say, of Evinrude, where people bought all these, the brand new stuff, and then they shut down the business and you can't get warranty, you can't get products, you got, a whole different ordeal. Like those people are now burned on two-strokes and they're burned on those brands. So I don't know if I would say that it's because people hate two-strokes. It's more that they hate the experience that they had with the two-stroke, because there's nothing inherently wrong with a two-stroke. Like I said, there's so many benefits with the power and the power to weight ratios and the instant power, like the cheap maintenance, like the ease of working on them. Like, it's not a bad engine. It is just that some people, especially now, people that have a 20, 25, 30-year-old two-stroke that has been used in saltwater, I always use saltwater because that's my experience. I don't know that much about you guys that live up north, that you live in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, all these places where you've got fresh water, all your stuff comes apart, everything's easy. You got 40-year-old engines that look like they're brand new. Like I don't have that. I get the salty, the busted, the 10 years, completely crusted, falling apart type of stuff where you have to heat it up to get it apart. Like, I'm dealing with that kind of stuff. So when I look at something, people here, you have a 15, 20-year-old engine. It just happens to be a two-stroke, but it's been used in saltwater. It has not been well maintained. And every time you use the boat, it's a problem. Something breaks. The CDI box goes bad. The ignition coils go bad. Your stator goes bad. The rectifier regulator goes bad. The ignition coils fail. You're always fouling plugs because it's over rich. The carburetor is always getting gummed up. The wires are melting. Your timer base is melted, and the magnets fall off the flywheel, and like all these things that happen with an engine that gets used constantly all year round in saltwater, not maintained, and is in the heat, the 100-degree weather, the sun, the 90-degree saltwater. Like, the engines, like, it just takes that abuse. And so people have that experience. So they equate that with a two-stroke. Not necessarily that it's the two-stroke. It's just that two-stroke that they had gave them all those problems, and then they bought a F-150 Yamaha, or they got, a 150 Merc, or they got a Suzuki 140, 175, 250. Like, it doesn't matter. They got that four-stroke, and it's quiet, it's fuel efficient, it is, full of power, and it gives them no problems. They have all the stuff on the dash. They can see all the stuff. So it's like the two experiences are completely different, because this one is nothing but good and this one was nothing but horrible. So they hate two-strokes because of that. And so I think, in my opinion, that's kind of like the answer to the question of why do people hate two-strokes. It's because of their experience, not necessarily because of the engine. It's because of their experience with a specific engine, because you can take someone else that knows what they're doing with a 92 stroke and have no problems with it. Yeah, granted, just like any outboard, you're going to have an issue. You run aground, you scratch up the skeg, you have a leak in your lower unit because you got fishing line around the prop shaft and it cut into the prop shaft seal and now it's leaking. All those things, you got a batch of bad gas and it gummed up your injectors or gummed up your carburetor. You got a clean carburetor. Like, all those things go into just natural boating in general. So that's my answer to that. So if you like this clip, you can watch the full podcast over here, or you can watch another clip over here.